And not just any father, the kind of father who made powerful men disappear, the kind of father whose name was whispered in fear across 3 continents, the kind of father who would soon be standing in front of them asking one simple question: which hand did you use to hold my son down? This is the story of how 4 arrogant executives destroyed their own lives in under 3 minutes. This is the story of a son who never asked for his father's world. And this is the story of what happens when you mistake someone's humility for weakness. Marcus Walker was 34 years old. He had rough hands, tired eyes, and a smile that still somehow managed to light up whenever his daughter Emma ran toward him at the end of each school day. That smile was the one thing he never lost, no matter what life threw at him, and life had thrown plenty. He worked the night shift as a janitor at Westbrook Tower, a sleek 52-story building in downtown Manhattan that housed one of the most prestigious investment firms in the country, Westbrook Capital. The men and women who worked there wore suits that cost more than Marcus made in 3 months. They drove cars that cost more than his entire apartment building, and most of them walked past Marcus every single night without even seeing him. He was invisible, a ghost with a mop, a shadow that cleaned up their messes, emptied their trash cans, and scrubbed the toilets they used without a second thought. And Marcus was fine with that. He didn't need their recognition. He didn't need their respect. All he needed was the paycheck that allowed him to keep a roof over Emma's head and food on her plate. Emma was 7 years old. She had her mother's eyes, big, brown, and full of wonder. Her mother, Sarah, had passed away 4 years ago from an illness that had taken everything from Marcus except his daughter: cancer. The word still felt like a punch to the gut every time he heard it. Sarah had fought for 2 years. Marcus had watched the love of his life fade away slowly, and he had been powerless to stop it. When she finally closed her eyes for the last time, holding his hand in that cold hospital room, Marcus had made her a promise. He would take care of Emma. He would give her the life she deserved, no matter what. That promise was the only thing that kept him going some days. The double shifts, the aching back, the exhaustion that seeped into his bones. It was all worth it when he came home at 6 in the morning and saw Emma sleeping peacefully in her little bed, clutching the stuffed rabbit that Sarah had given her on her 3rd birthday. Marcus lived in a small 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. It wasn't much: peeling wallpaper, a window that didn't quite close all the way, and a heater that worked when it felt like it. But it was theirs. He slept on the couch so Emma could have the bedroom. He ate smaller portions so she could have seconds. He wore the same 3 shirts to work so she could have new shoes for school. Every sacrifice was a silent act of love, and Marcus made those sacrifices gladly. What Emma didn't know, what no one knew, was that Marcus Walker wasn't born Marcus Walker. He was born Marcus Vittorio, the only son of Salvatore Vittorio, a name that meant nothing to the executives at Westbrook Capital, but a name that meant everything in a very different world. A world of shadows, a world of power, a world where loyalty was paid in blood and betrayal was punished with death. Salvatore Vittorio was the head of the Vittorio crime family, not the loud, flashy kind you see in movies, the quiet kind, the kind that owned judges, politicians, and police chiefs, the kind that operated legitimate businesses as fronts for operations that stretched across Europe and South America, the kind that nobody talked about because talking about them was dangerous. Marcus had walked away from that world when he was 19 years old. He wanted no part of it. He had seen what it did to people, the paranoia, the violence, the endless cycle of revenge. When he fell in love with Sarah, a sweet nursing student from Ohio who didn't know anything about his family, Marcus made a choice. He changed his name. He cut all ties. He disappeared. Salvatore had been furious. For a man like him, family was everything. To have his only son reject him, reject the empire he had built, it was the ultimate betrayal. But Salvatore loved Marcus in his own twisted way. He let him go. He kept his distance. He watched from afar as Marcus built a simple life with a woman he loved. When Sarah died, Salvatore had reached out. For the first time in 15 years, Marcus received a phone call from his father. "Come home," Salvatore had said. "Let me help you. Let me help my granddaughter." Marcus had refused. "I don't want Emma anywhere near that life. I don't want your money. I don't want your help. Just let us live in peace." Salvatore had gone silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, "As you wish, my son, but know this. If you ever need me, I will be there, no matter what. That is not a choice. That is what a father does." Marcus had hung up the phone and hadn't spoken to his father since. 3 years had passed. He had convinced himself that chapter of his life was closed forever. He was wrong. The Westbrook Tower operated around the clock, but the real action happened during the day, when the traders and executives filled the 47th floor with their shouting and their deals and their million-dollar egos. By the time Marcus clocked in at 10 p.m., the building was mostly empty. Just a few workaholics burning the midnight oil, security guards making their rounds, and the cleaning crew, Marcus and 2 other janitors who took care of everything from the lobby to the executive suites. Marcus didn't mind the quiet. It gave him time to think, time to breathe, time to exist without anyone looking down at him. But things changed 6 months ago when a new team took over the 47th floor. 4 senior executives from Westbrook Capital's London office had been transferred to New York. They were young, all in their early 30s, and they came from money. Old money, the kind of money that made people believe they were better than everyone else. The kind of money that made people think the rules didn't apply to them. Their names were Bradley Ashford, Tyler Cunningham, Preston Wells, and Chase Montgomery. They called themselves the Founders because their grandfathers had supposedly been among the original investors in Westbrook Capital back in the 1970s. Whether that was true or not, nobody questioned them. They had power, they had connections, and they had absolutely zero respect for anyone they considered beneath them, which was pretty much everyone. From the moment they arrived, they made Marcus's life difficult. Not in obvious ways at first. Small things, leaving extra trash everywhere, spilling coffee on purpose and watching him clean it up, making jokes about the help, just loud enough for him to hear. Marcus ignored it. He had dealt with worse. He kept his head down and did his job. But Bradley Ashford couldn't leave it alone. There was something about Marcus that bothered him. Maybe it was the fact that Marcus never reacted, never got angry, never showed any emotion at all. For a man like Bradley, who needed to feel powerful, who needed to see people cower, Marcus's quiet dignity was an insult. "What's your name again?" Bradley asked one night, blocking Marcus's path as he pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway. "Marcus, sir." "Marcus?" Bradley said the name like it was something dirty. "You've been working here a while, huh?" 3 years, sir." 3 years cleaning toilets. That's impressive." Bradley smirked at his friends who had gathered behind him like a pack of hyenas. "Tell me, Marcus, is this what you dreamed about when you were a kid? Did you always want to be a janitor?" Marcus met his eyes calmly. "I dreamed about providing for my family, sir. This job lets me do that." Something flickered in Bradley's expression. Annoyance. This wasn't the reaction he wanted. He wanted fear, shame. He wanted Marcus to look away, to shrink, to acknowledge that Bradley was better than him. "Must be tough," Tyler chimed in, stepping forward with that cruel smile of his. "Being a single dad and all. I heard about your wife. Cancer, right? That's rough." Marcus's jaw tightened. That was the first time any of them had mentioned Sarah, the first time they had crossed a line. "I need to get back to work," Marcus said quietly. He started to push his cart forward, but Bradley put his hand on it, stopping him. "We're not done talking to you, Marcus. Don't be rude." Marcus looked at Bradley's hand on his cart. Then he looked up at Bradley's face. For just a moment, a fraction of a second, something ancient and dangerous flickered in Marcus's eyes, a warning, a reminder of who he used to be, who his blood was. But then it was gone, buried, controlled. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus said. "I have work to do." He pushed past them and continued down the hallway, his heart pounding in his chest. He heard them laughing behind him, mocking him, but he kept walking. For Emma, for the promise he made to Sarah. He kept walking. That night, when he got home, he sat on the edge of his couch and stared at the wall for a long time. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from restraint. He had spent 15 years learning to control the darkness inside him, the Vittorio blood, the rage that had made his ancestors legends. He closed his eyes and thought about Emma, about her smile, about her laugh, about the way she said, "I love you, Daddy," every night before bed. That's what matters, he told himself, nothing else. He had no idea that Bradley and his friends were just getting started. The harassment escalated over the following weeks. Every night there was something new. One night Marcus arrived to find that someone had dumped an entire pot of coffee onto the carpet of the executive conference room, the beige carpet that had just been professionally cleaned. It would take him hours to get the stain out, and he would have to explain to his supervisor why the cleaning supplies were running low. Another night, someone had smeared something disgusting on the bathroom mirrors, the kind of prank that frat boys pulled. The kind of prank that grown men with 7-figure salaries shouldn't have time for, but they made time for it. Because it was fun for them, because Marcus was their entertainment. The other janitors noticed. Maria, a 50-year-old grandmother from the Dominican Republic who had been cleaning offices for 20 years, pulled Marcus aside one night. "You need to report this," she said, in her heavily accented English. "Those men are evil. They have no shame." "Report it to who?" Marcus asked. "They own this place, Maria. Their families own this place. Nobody's going to do anything." "Then you need to find another job. This isn't worth it." Marcus shook his head. "I can't. I need the health insurance for Emma. She has asthma, her medications, her doctor visits. I can't lose this job." Maria looked at him with sad eyes. "Then you have to endure it, mijo. But don't let them break you. Whatever they do, don't let them break you." Marcus nodded. He had endured worse. He could handle a few spoiled executives with too much time on their hands, but he underestimated them. He underestimated how far they would go. It happened on a Thursday night in November, the day before Marcus's birthday. Not that anyone except Emma knew that. She had made him a card at school, a crayon drawing of the two of them holding hands, standing in front of a house with a sun shining overhead. "Happy birthday, Daddy," she had written in her wobbly 7-year-old handwriting. "I love you to the moon and back." He had that card in his pocket when he walked into Westbrook Tower at 10 p.m. He had kissed Emma goodbye at the babysitter's apartment, Mrs. Chen, an elderly Chinese woman who watched her for free because Marcus had helped fix her leaky faucet once. He had promised Emma that he would bring her a special surprise when he came home. He never got to keep that promise. Marcus was cleaning the 47th floor, alone as usual. The other janitors were working different sections of the building. The security guard on duty was downstairs in the lobby, watching sports on his phone. Nobody was around. Nobody except Bradley, Tyler, Preston, and Chase. They had been drinking. Marcus could tell by the way they moved, loose and unsteady, by the way they laughed, too loud, too long, by the bottles of expensive whiskey scattered across Bradley's desk. They had been celebrating something, a deal, a bonus. It didn't matter. What mattered was that they were drunk, they were bored, and Marcus had just walked into their line of sight. "Well, well, well," Bradley said, rising from his chair. "Look who it is. Our favorite janitor." Marcus kept his head down. "I'll come back later," he said, turning to leave. "No, no, no." Bradley moved quickly, cutting off his exit. "Don't be rude, Marcus. We want to spend time with you." "Don't we, boys?" The other three surrounded him. They were smiling, But there was nothing friendly about those smiles. These were the smiles of predators who had cornered their prey. "We were just talking about you, actually," Tyler said, "about how you think you're better than us." "I don't think that, sir," Marcus said calmly. "Oh, but you do." Preston leaned in close. "We see it in your eyes. Every time we talk to you, there's this look, like you're judging us, like you think you're more of a man than we are." "I don't think anything like that." "Liar." Chase shoved him from behind, causing Marcus to stumble forward. "We see it. We all see it." Marcus's heart was racing now. He could feel the situation spiraling out of control. These men were drunk and angry and looking for a target, and he was it. "Look," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady, "I don't want any trouble. Let me do my job and I'll be out of your way." "Your job?" Bradley laughed bitterly. "Your job is whatever we say it is. You work for us, Marcus. You're nothing but a servant, a nobody. You push a mop around for minimum wage while we make more in a day than you'll see in your entire pathetic life." Marcus said nothing. He just stood there waiting for an opening to leave. But there was no opening. They had formed a circle around him. "You know what I think," Bradley said, his eyes gleaming with something cruel. "I think you need a lesson in humility. I think you need to understand your place in this world." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an electric razor, the kind barbers used. Marcus didn't understand at first. What was he doing with that? But then Bradley pressed the button, and the razor buzzed to life, and Marcus understood. "Hold him down," Bradley said. Marcus's instincts kicked in. 15 years of suppression vanished in an instant. He threw the first punch before any of them could react, a hard right hook that connected with Tyler's jaw and sent him crashing to the floor. He spun, ready to fight all of them, ready to become what he had sworn never to be again. But there were 4 of them and 1 of him, and they were younger, stronger, angrier. Preston tackled him from behind, driving him to the ground. Chase grabbed his arms. Tyler, recovering from the punch, grabbed his legs. And Bradley stood over him with the razor, laughing. "Hold him still," Bradley commanded. Marcus struggled. He thrashed. He screamed. But they pinned him down, 4 against 1 on the cold marble floor of the executive bathroom they had dragged him into. He could feel the razor against his scalp. He could hear it buzzing. He could feel his hair falling away in clumps. They shaved his head, all of it. While they laughed, while they mocked him, while they called him names that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Look at him," Bradley said, stepping back to admire his work. "Now you look like what you are, nothing." Marcus lay on the floor, his face pressed against the cold tile. Tears he couldn't control were streaming down his cheeks, not from pain, from humiliation, from rage, from the violation of everything he had worked so hard to protect. They took pictures, they filmed it on their phones. They high-fived each other like they had just won a championship game. Then they left. Just walked away like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't just destroyed a man's dignity for entertainment. Marcus lay there for a long time, minutes, hours. He didn't know. He couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't process what had just happened. When he finally got up and looked at himself in the mirror, he didn't recognize the man staring back at him. A bald stranger with red-rimmed eyes and a face twisted in shame. He thought about calling the police. But what would he say? That 4 rich executives had shaved his head? They would laugh at him. They would say it was just a prank. They would say he was overreacting. And then he would lose his job, his health insurance, everything. He thought about going up to the 47th floor and finishing what they had started. The Vittorio in him screamed for violence, for blood, for the kind of justice his family had dispensed for generations. But then he thought about Emma, about her card in his pocket, about the promise he had made to Sarah, so he cleaned himself up. He put on his hat to hide his bare scalp, and he finished his shift. At 6 in the morning, he walked home through the cold November air, his breath forming clouds in front of him. He let himself into the apartment as quietly as possible. Emma was still asleep. He sat on the couch and stared at the wall. And for the first time in 15 years he picked up his phone and dialed a number he had sworn never to call again. It rang twice. Then a voice answered, an old voice, a powerful voice. "Marcus?" His father sounded surprised, hopeful. "Is that you?" Marcus closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his cheek. "Papa," he whispered, "I need help." Salvatore Vittorio arrived in New York 3 days later. He didn't fly commercial. He didn't travel with an entourage. He simply appeared a 72-year-old man in an expensive coat and simple shoes, walking into Marcus's apartment building like he owned the place. Because in a way, he did. He had purchased the entire building 10 years ago under a shell company, just to keep an eye on his son from a distance, just in case. Marcus had never known this, but he wasn't surprised when his father told him. That was just who Salvatore was, a man who planned for every contingency, a man who never left anything to chance. They sat across from each other in Marcus's tiny living room, the former crime lord and his janitor son. Emma was at school. They had privacy. Salvatore listened, as Marcus told him everything about Sarah, about Emma, about his job, about the harassment, and finally about what had happened in that bathroom, about the razor, about the laughter, about the photos and videos those men had taken. Salvatore's face remained completely still throughout the story. Not a flicker of emotion, not a twitch of a muscle. Anyone watching would have thought he was bored. But Marcus knew better. He knew what that stillness meant. It meant his father was controlling a rage so profound, so volcanic, that releasing even a fraction of it would be dangerous. When Marcus finished, Salvatore was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "These men touched my son, my grandson's father. They put their hands on you. They humiliated you. They filmed it. Papa, they thought you were alone." Salvatore continued as if Marcus hadn't spoken. "They thought you were nothing, a nobody, a man without power, without protection, without family." He leaned forward, and his eyes, dark and ancient and terrifying, locked onto Marcus's. "They were wrong." Marcus shook his head. "I didn't call you to ask you to hurt them. I don't want violence. I don't want Emma to grow up knowing her grandfather is what you are." "Then what do you want?" "I want justice, real justice, not the kind you used to deliver. I want those men to face consequences. I want them to lose what they value most, their money, their power, their reputation. I want them to feel what I felt on that floor. I want them to know how it feels to be powerless." Salvatore studied his son for a long time. Then, slowly, a smile crossed his weathered face. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a chess master who had just seen a devastating move. "Justice," he repeated. "Yes, I can give you justice, the kind that will hurt them far more than anything I could do with my hands." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gray New York skyline. "You forget, my son, that my world is not only about violence. It is about power, about knowing things that others don't want known, about having leverage over the people who think they are untouchable." He turned back to face Marcus. "Do you know why men like your father have survived for generations while empires have fallen?" Marcus shook his head. "Because we are patient. Because we collect information the way others collect money. Because everyone has secrets. And those secrets are worth more than gold." He walked back to Marcus and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You want me to destroy these men? I will destroy them, but not with guns, not with blood, with truth, with exposure, with the kind of devastation that makes death seem merciful." "How?" Salvatore smiled again. "Leave that to me. For now, I want you to go to work tonight. I want you to act as if nothing has changed. Can you do that?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I can do that." "Good. And Marcus?" His father's grip tightened on his shoulder. "I am proud of you, not for calling me, for resisting for so long, for trying to give Emma a different life than the one I gave you. You are a better man than I ever was." Marcus felt something shift inside him, something he had carried for 15 years. Resentment, anger, confusion about his father began to loosen. "Thank you, Papa." Salvatore nodded. Then he walked toward the door. "One more thing," he said, pausing at the threshold. "By the end of this week, those men will be on their knees, begging you for forgiveness, and you will decide whether to give it." He left without another word. What happened next unfolded with the precision of a surgical operation. On Monday morning, Bradley Ashford arrived at work to find his access card rejected at the security gate. Confused, he called up to his assistant. No answer. He called Tyler. No answer. He called Preston and Chase. Nothing. Finally, building security approached him. "Mr. Ashford, there's been an issue. You need to come with us." Bradley was escorted to a conference room on the first floor. Not his floor, not the executive suite he was used to. A plain room with a plain table and uncomfortable chairs. Waiting for him were 4 men in suits. Not Westbrook Capital suits, government suits, FBI agents. "Mr. Ashford," the lead agent said, sliding a folder across the table. "My name is Special Agent Reynolds. We need to talk about your finances." Bradley's face went pale. "My finances? What about them?" "Specifically, about the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the ones you've been using to hide income from the IRS, the ones connected to insider trading schemes dating back 7 years. I don't know what you're—" "We have everything, Mr. Ashford. Emails, wire transfers, recorded phone calls." Agent Reynolds smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Someone very thorough put together quite a file on you. And your friends." Bradley's hand started shaking. "Who? Who gave you this?" "That's not important. What's important is that you're facing charges that carry a combined sentence of up to 40 years in federal prison, unless, of course, you're willing to cooperate." In another room down the hall, Tyler Cunningham was having a similar conversation, but his crimes were different. The file on Tyler contained evidence of something far more personal. A hit-and-run accident 5 years ago that had killed a pedestrian, a young woman, a nursing student. Tyler had paid off the witnesses, had the police report altered, had buried the truth so deep he had convinced himself it never happened. But someone had found the original report, the witnesses, the surveillance footage from a nearby ATM that clearly showed Tyler's car. The same someone had also found the family of the victim and helped them hire a lawyer who was now preparing a wrongful death lawsuit that would drain every penny Tyler had ever made. Preston Wells was confronted with evidence of a different kind of crime. Photos. Hundreds of them. Photos of him at parties that weren't supposed to be photographed. Photos of activities that would end his marriage, his career, and any hope he ever had of a respectable future. Someone had hacked into his private cloud storage. Someone had made copies, and someone was now sending those copies to every media outlet in the country. Chase Montgomery's downfall was perhaps the most poetic. He was the one who had filmed the attack on Marcus, who had gleefully recorded every second of the humiliation. And now, that same video had been anonymously submitted to every major news network, every social media platform, every viral content site on the internet. But the video had been edited, not to remove Chase's face or voice, but to highlight them, to make absolutely clear who was responsible, to include his full name, his job title, his company, and his contact information. By noon on Monday, the video had been viewed over 10 million times. Justice for Marcus was trending worldwide. The executives at Westbrook Capital were in full crisis mode, desperate to distance themselves from the 4 men who had just become the most hated people on the internet. By Tuesday, all 4 had been terminated. Their photos were everywhere. Their names were everywhere. Protesters gathered outside Westbrook Tower, holding signs and chanting for accountability. Reporters camped outside their homes, shoving microphones in their faces, demanding explanations. By Wednesday, their lawyers had abandoned them. Their families had distanced themselves. Their friends had stopped returning their calls. They were pariahs, untouchables, the very thing they had called Marcus. And it was only Wednesday. On Thursday evening, Marcus received a phone call. "It's time," his father said. "Come to the address I'm sending you." Marcus looked at Emma, who was doing her homework at the kitchen table. "I need to go out for a little while, sweetheart. Mrs. Chen is going to come stay with you." Emma looked up. "Where are you going, Daddy?" Marcus hesitated. Then he walked over and kissed her forehead. "I'm going to finish something I started. I'll be back soon." The address his father sent led to a warehouse in Brooklyn. From the outside, it looked abandoned, but inside, it was anything but. The main floor had been transformed into something like a courtroom. 4 chairs had been arranged in a row, facing a single chair across from them. Seated in those 4 chairs, their hands bound and their faces pale with terror, were Bradley, Tyler, Preston, and Chase. Salvatore Vittorio stood in the shadows, watching. A dozen men, his men, lined the walls, silent and motionless. Marcus walked in slowly, taking in the scene. He had expected to feel satisfaction, triumph, vindication. Instead, he just felt tired. He approached the 4 men who had tormented him, who had humiliated him, who had taken something from him that could never be fully restored. They looked different now. Gone were the expensive suits, the arrogant smirks, the air of invincibility. In their place were 4 broken men, tear-streaked, trembling, begging with their eyes. Bradley was the first to speak. "Marcus, please, we didn't know. We didn't know who you were. We didn't know your father was—" "Stop talking," Marcus said quietly. Bradley's mouth snapped shut. Marcus pulled a chair and sat down across from them, studying each face in turn. "You didn't know who I was," he repeated. "That's what you want to say? That you didn't know my father was a powerful man? That you wouldn't have touched me if you'd known I had connections?" "Yes," Tyler blurted out, "if we'd known. So you would have found someone else." Marcus's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Someone without protection, someone truly alone, someone who couldn't fight back. Silence. "That's what I thought." Marcus leaned forward. "Let me ask you something. All 4 of you. When you held me down on that floor, when you shaved my head while I screamed, did you think about my daughter?" None of them could meet his eyes. "Did you think about the fact that I'm a single father? That I'm all Emma has in this world? Did you think about what it would do to her if something happened to me?" "We were drunk," Preston whispered. "We weren't thinking—" "You were drunk." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's your excuse. That's your justification for treating another human being like an animal." He stood up and began pacing in front of them. "My wife died 4 years ago. Cancer. She fought for 2 years while I watched her disappear a little more each day. When she passed, I made her a promise. I promised I would take care of our daughter. I promised I would give her a good life. That promise is the only thing that has kept me going." He stopped and turned to face them. "When you put me on that floor, I thought about killing all of you. I know how to do it. My father trained me a long time ago. I could have ended all 4 of you before any of you knew what was happening." Their faces went even paler, but I didn't. Because I'm not that person anymore. Because my daughter needs a father, not a killer. Because I made a promise to a woman I loved, and I intend to keep it. He walked back to his chair and sat down. My father wanted to handle this his way, the old way. But I asked him for something different. I asked him for justice, real justice. The kind that exposes the truth, the kind that lets the world see who you really are. He gestured to the walls around them. "You've lost everything now, your jobs, your money, your reputations, your futures, and it's only going to get worse. Tyler, you're going to prison for what you did to that young woman, the one you killed and tried to cover up. Her family deserves to see you punished." Tyler started sobbing. "Preston, your wife has already filed for divorce." She's taking everything, every penny, every asset. You'll be lucky to afford a studio apartment when she's done with you." Preston's head dropped to his chest. "Chase, that video you filmed? The one you thought was so funny? It's going to follow you for the rest of your life. Every job interview, every date, every time someone searches your name, they'll see what you did. You'll never escape it." Chase was shaking uncontrollably. And Bradley. Marcus turned to face the ringleader, the man who had started it all. "You're looking at 40 years in federal prison, insider trading, tax evasion, fraud. You're going to grow old in a cell thinking about the choices you made, thinking about the man you could have been if you'd had an ounce of decency." Bradley's eyes were wild with desperation. "Please, please, Marcus, we'll do anything. Whatever you want. Just tell your father to call off his people. We'll pay you. We'll pay you anything. I don't want your money." Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. "I never wanted your money. I wanted to be left alone, to do my job, to provide for my daughter. That's all I ever wanted." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Emma's birthday card. The crayon drawing of the two of them holding hands. "This is what matters to me," he said, holding it up so they could see. "My daughter drew this. It was in my pocket that night when you were holding me down, when you were laughing." He carefully folded it and put it back in his pocket. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to ask my father to hurt you. The law will take care of Tyler and Bradley. Public shame will take care of Preston and Chase. That's justice enough for me." He stood up and looked at his father, who had emerged from the shadows. "We're done here, Papa." Salvatore nodded slowly. There was something in his eyes, respect perhaps, or maybe pride. "Are you sure?" Salvatore asked. "They hurt you. They deserve worse?" Marcus shook his head. "No, they deserve exactly what they're getting. Nothing more, nothing less." He turned to leave, then paused and looked back at the four broken men. "One more thing. When you're sitting in your cells, or in your empty apartments, or wherever you end up, I want you to remember something. I want you to remember the janitor, the nobody, the man you thought was beneath you." He walked toward the door. "I want you to remember that he showed you more mercy than you showed him." And with that, Marcus Walker walked out of the warehouse, out of his father's world, and back to the life he had chosen, back to Emma, back to the promise he had made. Behind him, the four men who had thought they were untouchable began to understand the truth. They had crossed the wrong person, not because of who his father was, but because of who Marcus was. A man who could have destroyed them completely but chose not to, and somehow that hurt more than anything else. 3 months later, Marcus received a letter. It came from a law firm he had never heard of, informing him that an anonymous benefactor had established a trust fund for Emma's education, enough money to send her to any college she wanted, enough money to give her the future she deserved. Marcus knew who the benefactor was. He didn't call to say thank you. He didn't need to. But that night, for the first time in 15 years, he sent his father a photograph of Emma, smiling and holding up a report card covered in gold stars. A few days later, he received a response. Not a letter, not a phone call, just a small package containing a single item, a brand new stuffed rabbit for Emma, to replace the one that was starting to fall apart. There was no note. There didn't need to be. Marcus put the rabbit on Emma's bed and watched her face light up when she came home from school. "Daddy, where did this come from?" Marcus smiled. "From someone who loves you very much." "Who?" "Family," Marcus said. "Just family." He thought about his father, about the complicated legacy of the Vittorio name, about the darkness that ran in his blood and the light he was trying to give his daughter. He thought about Sarah, about her smile, about the life they had built together, even if it had been cut short. And he thought about the 4 men who had tried to break him, who were now scattered to the winds, Tyler in prison awaiting trial, Bradley in custody fighting charges that would consume the rest of his life, Preston and Chase trying to rebuild from nothing, their names forever linked to shame. They had wanted to humiliate him, to make him feel small, to remind him of his place in the world. Instead, they had reminded him of something else entirely. They had reminded him that he was a father, a survivor, a man who could walk away from violence even when violence was deserved, a man who could choose mercy even when mercy wasn't earned. That was his legacy. That was what he would pass on to Emma. Not power, not revenge, not the Vittorio name, just love, strength, and the quiet dignity of a good man. 1 year later, Marcus no longer worked at Westbrook Tower. He had taken a job at a different company, a small nonprofit that helped homeless families find housing. The pay was less, but the work meant something. Every day, he got to help people who were struggling, people like him, people who had been knocked down by life and were trying to get back up. Emma was thriving. She was 8 years old now, top of her class, with a laugh that could brighten the darkest room. She had started asking questions about her grandfather, the mysterious man who sent her presents on her birthday and Christmas, who had never visited, but who Emma somehow knew existed. Marcus wasn't ready to explain everything yet. Someday he would. Someday he would tell her about the Vittorio family, about the choices he had made, about the night everything changed. But for now, he just told her the truth that mattered most. Your grandfather is a complicated man. He's done things I don't agree with. But he loves you, Emma. He loves you more than you know. Will I ever get to meet him? Marcus looked out the window at the New York skyline in the distance. Maybe. Someday, when you're older. Emma nodded, satisfied for now. Then she went back to her homework, humming a song to herself, completely unaware of the world of shadows that existed just beyond the edges of her safe, happy life. Marcus watched her for a long moment. Then he picked up the photograph on his desk, the one of Sarah, taken on their wedding day, her smile bright and full of hope. "I'm keeping my promise," he whispered to the photo. "I'm taking care of her, just like I said I would." The photo didn't answer. It never did. But somehow, Marcus felt like Sarah could hear him. He put the photo down and went to help Emma with her math problems. Outside, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In a warehouse in Brooklyn, Bradley Ashford's empire had crumbled to dust. In a prison upstate, Tyler Cunningham was beginning a sentence that would consume the best years of his life. In a small apartment somewhere in Queens, Preston Wells was learning how to cook for himself for the first time. His fortune gone, his wife gone, his pride gone. And somewhere on the internet, Chase Montgomery's face was still appearing in videos and memes, his shame immortalized forever in the digital age. They had tried to break a janitor, a single father, a nobody. They had failed. And Marcus Walker, the man who had walked away from darkness, who had chosen mercy over revenge, who had proven that true strength has nothing to do with power, went to sleep that night with his daughter curled up next to him, a stuffed rabbit in her arms, and the quiet peace of a man who had finally found justice. Not the justice of violence, not the justice of revenge, the justice of truth, the justice of exposure, the justice of a world that had finally seen the monsters for what they were and rejected them completely. That was enough. For Marcus, it would always be enough. The security footage from that night at Westbrook Tower was eventually leaked to the public. All of it. Not just the attack, but the aftermath. The 4 executives laughing, high-fiving, taking photos, celebrating their cruelty like it was a game. The footage went viral. It was shown on news programs around the world. It sparked conversations about workplace bullying, about the abuse of power, about the way society treats workers in low-wage jobs. And in the middle of all that chaos, one image emerged that captured the public's imagination. It was a still frame from the footage, taken just seconds after the attack ended. It showed Marcus lying on the bathroom floor, his head newly shaved, his face pressed against the cold tile. But it wasn't his pain that people noticed. It was his eyes. Even in that moment of ultimate humiliation, there was something in his eyes that refused to break, something fierce, something undefeated. That image became a symbol, a reminder that dignity cannot be taken, only surrendered, that the measure of a person is not how they act when they have power, but how they act when they have none. Marcus never asked to be a symbol. He never wanted fame or recognition. He just wanted to be a good father, a good man. But sometimes the world sees something in us that we cannot see in ourselves. Sometimes our darkest moments become the light that guides others through their own, and sometimes, just sometimes, justice really does prevail. Not always through courts and lawyers, not always through violence and revenge, but through truth, through exposure, through the simple, powerful act of standing up and refusing to be broken. Marcus Walker stood up, and the men who tried to break him spent the rest of their lives on their knees, begging for a forgiveness they would never receive. The security footage would later show everything: the laughter, the cruel hands, the electric razor buzzing, as 4 grown men held Marcus down on the cold bathroom floor of Westbrook Tower, shaving his head while he screamed. They didn't know they were being recorded. They didn't know a lot of things. But they would find out soon enough, every last one of them, that the quiet janitor they had just humiliated for their amusement had something they could never have imagined: a father